Hello there, welcome back and welcome to a review video, or perhaps I should say a preview video, because today I am previewing a set which will soon be released from Maritime Models. This is a fully stainless steel photo etch set of Titanic's 4 Marconi Telegraph aerials. So here is the set on the screen now, and Neil over at Maritime Models has sent me this. This is actually a prototype. And Neil has sent me this so that I could try it out on my model to see if it fits, and then also to give any sort of feedback I had regarding either the design or also any improvements that I could think of as well. So over the course of the video I will show you this set. I will talk through any of the slight changes I perhaps suggested, and then I'll also show you how it measures up against any other sets like this on the market today. So without any further ado, let's crack on! So to show you the design from Maritime Models, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to compare it against the original design that I used when I first finished my model Titanic. And the first thing to say about the Maritime Models piece is that, to the best of my knowledge, this is the only set currently available that gives you the actual wireless telegraph aerials. When I built mine, this one I'm pointing at right now, I used the KA set, and the KA set provides you with 2 of these spreaders. So that is this brass bar and the 4 lines coming out like this. Gives you 2, one to connect onto the forward mast and one to connect onto the aftermast. What it doesn't give you is any of the actual aerial wires that ran between them. And as you can imagine, these are pretty long. These are about, I don't know, they're probably about 70 centimeters long. So I used guitar strings, but these are very, very difficult to do. And as you can imagine, because these free hang, any difference in length between the 4 wires creates quite a bad visual effect, which is tricky and frustrating to get right. The other problem with the KA set piece is that it's made of brass, and case in point, this happens. And as you can actually see on my piece, there's solder everywhere because these have fallen off more times than I can count. The brass is just not really strong enough for the job, and because of that it fatigues and it breaks. So the first major improvement I would flag on the Maritime Models piece is that it's made of stainless steel, which is far, far harder wearing, and it takes a lot more effort to make it fatigue. Now the next part that I'd like to sort of draw your attention to is the accuracy of the Maritime Models piece, because as we all know, Titanic had 4 aerial wires, but these were not equally spaced apart. This wire and this wire will have been 6 feet apart, but the 2 central wires would actually have been 8 feet apart. And if I zoom in, you can see that that is actually faithfully recreated on the Maritime Models piece. However, it is not recreated on the KA piece. As you can see, all of the wires are exactly the same distance apart. So the Maritime Models gets a tick in the box for accuracy. And here is a photo of Titanic, and as you can see, there's a clear difference in the spacing of the Marconi aerials. So as I say, big tick in the box there for Maritime Models. Now, as we work our way down, we get to the first section of interest on these wires. This is the section where cables dropped down into the Marconi room. Now, unfortunately, I couldn't find a photo of Titanic that actually showed this, but this is a very good quality rigging plan, and as you can see, what I'm talking about are the drop-down wires that drop down from the Marconi telegraphs just forward of funnel number 2. Now again, you can see on my set, because I had to pretty much sort of make it up from scratch, it looks fine, and I was pretty happy with it at the time, but it does look a bit rough and ready. You can see sort of blobs of solder and the like. On the Maritime Models, there's simply 3 sort of bulges in the wires, which you can solder wires onto far more easily. Working back still further, you can see that on my telegraph wires, I've had to solder spacers at regular intervals because otherwise my wires would not hang straight. This problem doesn't exist on the Maritime Models stainless steel piece because it's been etched as one. So provided you handle it carefully and you look after it well, these wires should all hang perfectly parallel with each other. Now, just to prove this, here is the Maritime Models telegraphs hanging on my model, and as you can see, all 4 wires hang perfectly parallel whilst unsupported. Now, the next part of interest is this section here. Now, I appreciate it's quite hard to picture on the camera because we've sort of moved quite a lot of the aerials off the screen, but this is about 2/3 of the way along. And what a lot of people don't realise is that on the Titanic's wireless aerials, the first sort of 3/4 of the length were taken up with metallic strings that received radio transmissions, but the last section was actually not part of the antenna. So what you had is you had insulators, and that's exactly what these bits are here. And I'll zoom in once again so you can see them more clearly. These are insulators, and as you can see, these are just recreated with slightly thicker pieces of wire in this area. Now, if we zoom in on this photo of Titanic, you can actually just make out the insulators through the haze. They're about 3/4 of the way along the telegraphs, and they just look like a slightly fatter section of wire. But this is the insulators, and Maritime Models did a very good job of recreating this little detail. And what I've done on my model, and I'll show you this more closely, is I've just painted these a different colour just to make sure that they pop and they stand out. And this is another lovely little bit of detail that you just don't get on anything else. I didn't get it when I made my own aerial because, of course, I just didn't quite have the ability to do it. It's a really nice bit of design. Now, the last little thing that I want to draw your attention to is right at the end of the aerial here. And I'll bring my aerial into view as well. Here we go. On Titanic, this last spreader, the aft spreader that connects into the mast, actually had a single piece of wire that then led to the section that bonded it onto the mast. So there was a single piece of wire before the spreader spread out the 4 wires. And once again, zooming in, this time on a different photo of Titanic, we actually can pick out that particular piece of detail. Now, Maritime Models once again recreates that piece of detail. On the KA variant, you don't get that. You just get exactly the same piece that is shown on the front mast. So yet again, Maritime Models just gives you that little bit more accuracy. Now this set comes with one other addition, which is these 4 pieces here. Now these are additional batons that you glue onto the under and overside of these spreader bars here. And the idea of these is it just thickens them up and it gives it a more sort of 3D image. Of course, the one limitation you always have with photo etch is that it is very much a 2D shape. And so by adding these batons on, you just make these spreaders seem more 3D. So far, so good. This is by a long way significantly more historically accurate than anything I was able to make for my model. And it's also significantly easier to work with as well. So I'll now go ahead and fit this to my model, and then I will talk through some more of the benefits of this kit. So here you go. Here it is now all cut out and fitted onto my model, and as you can see, it hangs really nicely and it looks really elegant when supported from the 2 masts. One thing I was a bit concerned about was that if you have a very high detail mast, there's a sort of little top hat at the top of the mast, which is slightly thicker than the mast underneath, and I was a little bit worried that the sort of hook that hooks over the top of the mast and supports the antennae, I was a little bit worried that that might not fit over the top of it, but it clearly is not an issue. It fits over the top just fine. So as you can see, I've just picked out some of the more interesting details on this set in different colours. So as you can see, the insulators are painted a quite sort of light hemp kind of colour. And I've also painted any sections that I think would not have been metallic, so any sections that weren't actual antennae, I painted them black just to symbolise that they might have been sort of wrapped in a sort of resin impregnated sort of material for waterproofing as well. And I've left all of the actual aerial sections metallic. So there you go, that is the prototype as it stands. I'm now just going to finish off the video by talking over some of the improvements that I have discussed with Neil. So the first thing I suggested was just to take up the antennae slightly. I felt that on the prototype they just sat a little bit too low above the funnels, and so I felt that just by shortening the antennae, even if it's just by a few millimeters, just to raise them up a little bit more and just make that sag a little bit less, would just improve it that bit more. The next thing I suggested was that at present the prototype doesn't come with any drop-downs into the Marconi room. It has the holes to mount these, as I've already shown you, but it doesn't actually come with the drop-downs itself. So I suggested, just really for the completeness of the kit, it would be worth including those as well. The final suggestion I made was just to thicken up the insulators a touch, and maybe also to add some additional parts onto the sprues so that you can thicken them up in 3D space, a little bit like has been done with the spreader batons. So there you go. All in all, a really, really good add-on for the model. I think particularly the fact that it's made out of stainless steel just means that it's going to be so much more hard-wearing than if it were made of brass like the KA version. Particularly on a model like mine, where you're sort of lifting it on and off every so often to get at the batteries within the model, particularly for an RC model where you're going to be continually handling it, it's just going to be so much more durable, which I think is just, really, really worthwhile. And as well, it makes what is otherwise a really tricky bit of modelling so much easier. I mean, you saw with the Telegraph that I made, it was okay, but it wasn't brilliant. And this gives you a far better result for a lot less effort, actually. So I think this will be a really good set when it comes out. Now, just to sort of to clarify, this is a prototype, so it's not available to the general public as yet. Neil sent it to me because he needed somebody who has a model that we could test fit it on, so that's why I've got it. It's not available to the general public as yet. What I will do though is I will pop a video, I shall pop a link in the description to Maritime Models website, and that is where you will be able to buy this from in due course. So keep your eyes peeled on the website, and it will become available in due course once the prototyping phase has been completed. So, thank you very much, Neil, for sending me that. It was a real treat to actually to test it out and to put it on the model. It has improved my model no end. And thank you very much for watching. I shall see you in the next one. Bye for now.